Now, time for the keynote address, and I would like to invite Dr. Rakshanda Jalil to deliver today's keynote. She is a renowned writer, translator, and literary historian, and is known for her works like Invisible City and Liking Progress, Loving Change. She is also the founder of Hindustani Awaz, which promotes Hindu Urdu literature and culture. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rakshanda Jalil to the stage.
Mr. Jayakumar, Professor Jamila Begum, members of the Wakam Maulvi Foundation Trust, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be invited to speak here today in this inaugural session. When Professor Dilip Menon reached out to me, I must confess I didn't know very much about Wakam Maulvi, but the more he told me about him, the more I read about him, it struck me that there were remarkable similarities between Wakam Maulvi and somebody that I have been, as it were, living with for a very long time. His name is Hasrat Mohani, Maulana Hasrat Mohani. And he's just younger by 2 years from Wakam Maulvi. He lives at the other end of the Indian subcontinent, but he occupies the same time and space and world and shares many, many common concerns. So as I spoke with Professor Menon, it seemed to me appropriate to share my ongoing work on Hasrat Mohani. There are commonalities, there are differences too, but it seemed timely for various reasons to visit him. And as Mr. Jayakumar just said, some people become an icon, they become a symbol. Wakam Maulvi, as he says, is a symbol of freedom of speech. Maulana Hasrat Mohani is a symbol of dissent, of having an opinion, and in the face of all other good sense of sticking by that opinion. So I've come with a written paper I'd like to read, and I've been warned that there is some bomb squad and some checking and so on happening at some point. Yes, yes. So I will have to stop very abruptly at some point and take it up if time permits. If not, then please wait when this book is eventually published, because it's a work in progress. So do give me a sign when you want me to get off the stage. Born Sayyid Faslul Hasan, better known by his pen name, Hasrat Mohani. He was born in 1875 and he died in 1951. He was an Urdu journalist and a poet, as well as an ardent freedom fighter and freethinker. He was also a member of the Constituent Assembly, one of 299 men and women who deliberated over 2 years, 11 months, and some weeks, all from 1946 to 1949, on drafting the Constitution of India. I'm currently perusing the debates of the Constituent Assembly, and I see Hasrat Mohani popping up all the time. At that point, he is with the Muslim League, but at some point when the Muslim League wants its members to not be part of the deliberations, he, along with 30 other people, leave the Muslim League and continue in the process of drafting the Constitution. So far, the ones I have read, and as I say, this is a work in progress, the interjections are mostly on federalism. They are on the preamble. He has very strong views on the preamble. Reservations for religious minorities, abolition of the zamindari system, and a whole host of others. Ever the contrarian, Hasrat, however, I shall be referring to Hasrat Mohani as Hasrat, because that is his pen name, and in the Urdu-speaking world, that is how Hasrat is referred to. So when it came to signing the Constitution, Hasrat chose not to sign the draft Constitution, as he was dissatisfied with it on several counts, especially on the reservation of seats for minorities. Till Hasrat was with the Muslim League, and he's at pains to say this time and time again, he said it made sense for the Muslims to consider themselves a minority. But when you are not with the Muslim League, when you are part or you want to be a part of a functioning democracy, then there is no place for minorities. And he this was a sticking point for him because the others didn't agree, especially Dr. Ambedkar didn't agree, and therefore Hasrat chose not to sign the draft of the constitution. Hasrat Mohani took his takhallus or nom de plume as Hasrat, meaning longing, and wrote some of the most sweetly romantic ghazals in the high classical register. Some of you who are familiar with Hindi film songs in particular might have heard of Chupke Chupke Raat Din Aasu Bahana Yaad Hai. It was sung by Ghulam Ali. Of course, it was sung by Ghulam Ali before the film Nikah, but it was the film really that gave it a wider readership. And this is just one that I'm citing, but in Urdu poetry, Hasrat has a place for himself as a major ghazal go, a writer of the ghazal. While he was a founder member of the powerful literary grouping known as the Progressive Writers Association, he stood up against the might of this very formidable body. As I say, he was a contrarian, and while he was part of various groups, he also chose to take the dissenting voice. In 1945, in Hyderabad, the All India Urdu Progressive Writers met. And the who's who of the Urdu writers and poets galaxy is present there. And a motion is being passed by a very formidable Marxist critic, Ihtisham Hussain, saying that we should ban obscenity from literature. And this was an afternoon session, and maybe this motion might have been passed because people were sort of not really paying much attention. And who stands up? This Daridar Maulana, who raises his hand and says, I object. And why? And he says, in all seriousness, he says, first define obscenity and then make a distinction between what he says in Urdu, latif hawas nigari, delicate obscenity and indelicate obscenity. The idea was found to be quite absurd and the motion was scuttled. And so the Progressive Writers Association and its very, very esteemed members were saved the embarrassment of trying to ban obscenity from literature. Hasrat Mohani is also known for, there is some dispute here. Some people think he hadn't quite coined it, but others definitely believe that he used the expression Inqilab Zindabad at a trade union rally in Calcutta in 1928. And from there onwards, the slogan acquired a kind of a speed and an agency almost of its own. But I'm still trying to figure out, and there is one school of thought that says Iqbal had coined it, but one has not been able to verify it. But definitely it was Hasrat who used it as a slogan and who gave it the kind of sort of, life it has today. But what we do know for a fact is in 1921, in the Ahmedabad session of the All India Congress, 8 years before the Congress themselves would move the motion for Purna Swaraj, it was Hasrat who very vehemently talked about the idea of Mukammal Azadi, complete freedom. And in this, he was way ahead of it. And he was talked down by no less than Mahatma Gandhi and others at this Ahmedabad session. And it took the Congress 8 years to say that no, home rule and so on is not going to work. What we need as a nation is not to be part of just the Commonwealth, but we need Swaraj in its true sense of the word. Now, we know he's been a member of the Muslim League, we know he's been with the Congress, but he has also been with the Communist Party of India from its inception. In fact, in 1925 in Kanpur, when the first session happens, he's right there. He is he's giving the inaugural address. He's an active member of the reception committee. Independent and liberal-minded, Hasrat was a devout Muslim who had performed the Hajj pilgrimage no less than 11 times. And yet, this is how he describes himself. I will be reading a lot of Urdu sher as I go along because I can't talk about Hasrat, the poet, and not talk about his poetry, but I will have some rather rough translations. I've not had time to really fine-tune them, but they will give you a sense of what he's saying. Now, here is how he describes himself. And this he read at a mushaira in Bombay. Darveshio inqalab maslak hai meri, Sufi momin hoon, ishtiraki Muslim. My chosen path is poverty and revolution. I am a Sufi believer and a communist Muslim. The poverty part is actually true. He lived in lifelong penury. Despite being a graduate from MEO College, when jobs were going for people like him with his qualifications, many of his peers from Aligarh went on to join the government in different ways. Hasrat chose never to be gainfully employed. Hasrat chose never to wear Western clothes. He was always, from his student days till the day he died, he wore an achkan made of coarse khadi and a cotton pajama, a topi on his head, and always had a big beard. Now, having given away the ancestral lands, he belonged to a small feudal family in Mohan, in Unnao district of Uttar Pradesh. He gave away those ancestral lands. He survived on whatever little money he earned, either from the books that he wrote. He wrote some critical studies of Ghalib and other poets, and he ran this newspaper. So obviously the income was very, very modest. And he also ran a Swadeshi store from his home in Kanpur along with his wife. So we have accounts of his contemporaries who talk of how very frugally he had to live perforce, how there were occasions when he starved. We also know, and Hasrat himself has talked about it, so have his friends, that he lived for days on just sukhi roti, dry bread, which he would dip into water and eat because that is all he had. And he was too proud to ask for help, and neither he nor his wife ever thought of asking for any kind of help. However, as though nothing was beyond the pale when it came to embracing seeming contraries, Hasrat was also a devotee of the Hindu god Krishna. All his life, Hasrat was extremely fond of going to the town of Mathura, which is Krishna's birthplace, to celebrate the festival of Janmashtami. And he also wrote the most lyrical ballads in his Krishnji, to what he called Krishnji Bhagwan. And these have pride of place in his collected works in the Kulyat. Some written in chaste Urdu, others in the Awadhi dialect. Now, Awadhi is a dialect which is spoken in the Awadh region. Unnao, where Mohan is located, which was Hasrat Mohani's birthplace. I think his mother and the women in the house would have spoken Awadhi, and so he uses Awadhi also in many instances. Now, these love songs to Krishna contain a combination of irreconcilables that melt away in the face of true piety, calling the blue god Hazrat Shri Krishna Alayha Rahma, which means the Venerable Shri Krishna, blessed be his name. He showed how it is entirely possible for a Pachvakta Namazi Musalman, one who offers his namaz 5 times a day, and one would imagine for whom worship of any deity is kufr. But for Hasrat, he shows that it is possible to adore the other. Consider this verse of Hasrat's. Maslate ishq hai, parastishe husn, hum nahi jante azabo sawab. The path of love leads to the worship of beauty. I know neither reward nor punishment. Offering a clue to the light of love that lit his path, be it Makkah or Barsana, Medina or Mathura, Ajmer or Nandgaon, he wrote of what he called Bue Uns, the fragrance of oneness that he thinks permeates both. Here's another, I'm reading just fragments from very long poems. Irfan ishq naam hai mera, Irfan ishq naam hai mere maqam ka, hamil hu kiske nagmae main ke payam ka. The name of my destination is the knowledge of love. I am pregnant with the message of that melodious flute. Now, all this is not just unusual for a Muslim, it's unusual for a man, it's unusual for a practicing Muslim to talk like this. Seeing no duality between his assiduous Roza Namaz and ardent Krishna Bhakti, this bearded, sherwani-clad gentleman from Qasba Mohan resorted to the more rustic Awadhi register to express his grand passion when the chaste Urdu meter failed him. I'm not sure if the audience here will understand it, but there's a certain musicality to this. Please do listen. Man to se preet lagai kanhai, kahu aur kisurati ab kahe ko ai, gokul dhoond, brindaban dhoondo, barsana lag, घूम के आई, तन मन सब वार के हसरत, मथुरा नगर चली धूनी रमाई. My heart has fallen for you, Krishna. How can I think of anyone else now? I searched for him in Gokul and in Vrindavan. I even went to Barsana looking for him. Having sacrificed everything for him, I, Hasrat, am now going to set up my abode in Mathura. Locked up in Yerwada Central Jail in Pune for his seditious activities. This, incidentally, is shortly after the Congress session in Ahmedabad in 1921, when he's talking about Purna Swaraj. With the coming of Janmashtami, and Hasrat is behind bars, and every year, ordinarily, he would go to Mathura for Janmashtami, and here he is behind bars. This is how he expresses his longing. Mathura ka nagar hai aashiqi ka, dam bharti hai arzu isi ka. What I'm reading for you are fragments. These are either in the form of ghazals, as in 2-line verses, or they are in the form of long poems. Mathura is the city of love, and all my desires are centered on it. But it wasn't just on Krishna that Hasrat wrote. His collected works, the Kulliyat-e Hasrat Mohani, is brimful with his wide and varied interests. Writing prolifically in Urdu, he drew upon world events to inspire, rouse, and challenge the imagination of his fellow Indians. And here I'm especially struck by Wakam Maulvi. Professor Dilip Menon had very kindly forwarded a write-up on Wakam Maulvi recently. And I'm struck by the range of interests that Wakam Maulvi and Hasrat Mohani share, especially when it comes to events in West Asia, events that spill over and continue to haunt us to this day. But like Wakam Maulvi, and incidentally, I forgot to say this in the beginning, but both Wakam Maulvi and Hasrat Mohani take to their periodicals. I mean, there are several in the case of Wakam Maulvi. There is Swadesh Abhimani that was referred to earlier. There is the Muslim. There is Al-Islam. There is Deepika. In the case of Hasrat Mohani, there is Urdu-e-Mualla, which keeps getting closed because of forfeiture of its, deposits, and the British government keeps banning it. But every now and then, when he comes out of jail, he revives it. In his absence, his wife runs Urdu-e-Mualla. So both Wakam Maulvi and Hasrat Mohani use these periodicals to talk about their concerns. And what are these concerns? Especially the ones in common: the fate of Jerusalem after the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire, the state of the holy cities of Makkah and Medina, and the increasing British presence in the Middle East. Be it international events such as the Balkan Wars, the fall of Jerusalem, the breaking up of the Ottoman Empire, or events abroad that had repercussions in India, such as the 2 world wars, or events specifically aimed at India, such as the Rowlatt Act, we have a plethora of poems, newspaper editorials, and essays giving us a comprehensive idea of the disquiet that afflicted Hasrat's mind, as indeed that generation of Indians. It must be stressed that while writing in Urdu, Hasrat was not addressing Muslims alone, for Urdu was the lingua franca of that time. His range of interests is Catholic, all-embracing, inclusive. Hasrat is often talking about pan-Islamic concerns. He's talking about Cordoba and other things that pop up in his poetry like metaphors. But I will still maintain that Hasrat is not writing just for Muslims. I think Hasrat is giving voice to the angst of his generation, and he is keeping a very close watch on all that is happening in this very turbulent phase of India's politics. Now, here is Hasrat on the Montego reforms, for example, of 1919, which he called Kaghaz ke phool, paper flowers, which neither have the color nor the fragrance, and they will do nobody any good. So this is what he has to say about the Montego reforms. किस दर्जा फरेब से है ममलू तजवी से रिफॉर्म Montaigu. How replete with deception it is, this scheme of reform by Montaigu. And he goes on to say, I'm not reading the Urdu part, but just the translation. In the whole wide world, it is known that these aspects of the Constitution spell complete control over legislation. Now, I want to digress very briefly here and just point out that this is an age when the poet is not just a wordsmith. He's not just writing pretty poetry. Again, there is this stereotype that the Urdu poet is obsessed with the Shama Parwana, is talking about romance. No, there is a great deal of political vim and vigor. There's a great deal of political muscle in what is being written by the poets of this age and by the Urdu poets in particular. Now, so I think many of these poets saw it as their own sort of self-appointed task. To use a legal word, this is the brief they give themselves. They want to make complex political occurrences and events accessible to the lay reader. Why? Because poetry is widely read, widely heard through public platforms such as the Mushaira. So the poets of the age think that it is their job to, as it were, supplement and complement what the average Indian is reading through newspapers. And I think this is very interesting, and sadly, in Urdu at least, it seems to have leached out to a great extent. Hasrat had written his first ghazal in 1893 while he was still a lad living at home in Mohan. And his early poetry is in the high classical register, the kind of talim, the kind of teaching he had been given in Arabic, in Persian, that we see influences of that in the very classical kinds of ghazal he's writing in his early days. But when he joins the MAO College, as the Aligarh Muslim University is known at that point, Hasrat joins in 1899 to do a graduate degree. It's interesting that Hasrat did apply for an LLB, but the principal then, Morrison, declined it. And it's a good thing that Hasrat never got around to doing his LLB, because we don't know what his career trajectory would have been. But while he was doing his graduation, it took him that much longer to finish it because he was expelled 3 times from the college for raising anti-British slogans. He was allowed to take his exams because of the intervention of his teachers, or else the principal wouldn't have allowed him to even take the exams. Now, I just want you to remind yourself of the fact that this time, this turn of the century, when Hasrat is just coming out of college as a fresh graduate, this is a time when a great ferment is brewing in the Indian mind. The Japanese victory over Russia in 1904-5 had inspired Asian leaders and stiffened their resolve to end colonial rule. In India, the extremists led by Bal Gangadhar Tilak felt vindicated, for they had all along rejected the politics of mendicancy and subservience in favor of radical activism. Now, fresh out of the MAO College, Hasrat developed a great fondness for Tilak. This again is interesting because there were not very many Muslims who were at that point drawn towards Tilak's sort of hardline approach to many things. On Tilak's passing in 1920, Hasrat wrote a glowing panegyric. जब तक वो रहे दुनिया में रहा हम सब के दिलों पर जोर उनका, अब रह के बहिश्त में निज़्द खुदा हूरों पे करेंगे राज तिलक. For as long as he lived in this world, he ruled over our hearts. Now in paradise, Tilak will rule over the Houris. With Gandhi's return to India and the launch of the Swadeshi movement, Hasrat opened a Swadeshi store in his home in Kanpur. Deeply impressed by the Russian Revolution, Hasrat carried its imprint in all his later writings. As chairman of the reception committee of a conference of loosely coalitioned peasant and workers' unions, as well as communist sympathizer groups, held on 25th December 1925 at the sidelines of the Kanpur session of the All India Congress. This is what Hasrat has to say in his capacity as chairman of the reception committee. And I'm quoting, "The movement of communism is the movement of peasants and workers, The people of India generally agree with the principles and aims and objects of this movement. But owing to certain misunderstandings, some weak and nervous people fear the very name communism. Our aims and objectives, and it's very interesting, throughout the speech he says our, we, us. Our aims and objectives is to establish Swaraj, or complete independence by all fair means. Remember, this is 1925. The Congress has still not adopted this. Is to establish Swaraj, or complete independence by all fair means. Some evilly disposed persons incriminate communism as necessarily an anti-religious movement. The fact, however, is that in matters of religion, we allow the largest possible latitude and toleration. Quote closes. Hasrat's life and career begs the question, is being a practicing Muslim and a believing communist a contradiction in terms? Not really, it would seem. After all, both Islam and socialism preach equality and brotherhood and advocate an egalitarian society. I want to talk a little. How am I doing for time, or do we have time? 8 minutes? All right. No account of Hasrat's life is complete without a reference to his wife, who was his true Sharik-e-Hayat, his life partner. His marriage to Nishat-un-Nisa Begum, which lasted 37 years till she died. It's another matter that he married the very next year. She died of a long illness in 1937. Is vital to understanding his life and work. She came from a landed feudal family like him. She had been tutored at home in Urdu, in Persian, and in Arabic. And we know that later she picked up enough Urdu to do the correspondence and the letters and others that had to be written on behalf of Hasrat every time he was imprisoned. So Begum Hasrat was a very sort of passionate letter writer for her husband to have him released from jail. So we know that she picked up enough English later. She discarded the parda early on and helped her husband in running the newspaper Urdu-e-Mualla. In fact, in one of the old copies of Urdu-e-Mualla, I found a very passionate plea from Begum Hasrat Mohani for women to abandon the parda. She traveled singly and with him to attend the 20th session of the All India Congress Committee in Bombay in 1904. She was there with him. We have references to her. Then very next year in the 21st session in Banaras, again, she traveled with him. She took part, she gave speeches. And she also went on the Hajj with him, where she has written an account of her travels in the form of a Roznama. Siobhan Lambert Hurley is sitting here in the audience, and she has, with colleagues, edited this marvelous book. I strongly urge you to read it, on the Muslim women travelers across 3 centuries. And in that, there is a wonderful account which has been translated from Urdu of Nishat-un-Nisa Begum. They're referred to as Begum Hasrat Mohani, who met and interacted with her fellow pilgrims on board the pilgrim ship. And what she wrote in her diary finds place in Siobhan's book. Nishat-un-Nisa's letters to her husband and his to her are a testament of a marriage that was built on mutual respect. Somebody has put these together, so we have a very luminous account of a very interesting partnership, of marriage. The only photograph of Nishat-un-Nisa is a group photograph that hangs in the office of the All India Women's Conference in Delhi. It shows a confident, poised woman, her face unveiled, she's dressed in a sari, and she's standing alongside other women delegates of the Women's Indian Association, led by Annie Besant and Margaret Cousins. And this is on the occasion when they traveled to Madras to meet Lord Edwin Montagu in 1917. Hasrat wore coarse handspun khadi all life long, lived in abject penury, never took up a job, extolled the virtues of self-denial and self-sacrifice. And I haven't had the occasion to talk about his Sufi side, but indeed he took Bai'at, which is taking allegiance, from the age of 13. And he was in the Qadiriya silsila. And later, as he progressed in that silsila, he could also give Bai'at or allegiance to others. And yet, this is what he has to say. गांधी की तरह बैठ के काटेंगे क्यों चरखा? गांधी की तरह बैठ के काटेंगे क्यों चरखा? लेनिन की तरह देंगे दुनिया को हिला हम. Why should we sit and spin yarn on the charkha? Like Lenin, we will shake the world. Living in an India that now requires Indians to be resolutely one or the other, Maulana Hasrat Mohani's immense capacity to contain within himself many seemingly diverse ideologies and beliefs holds a lesson. It reminds us of William Blake, the English poet, who had said, "Without contraries, there is no progression." A study of the life and career of this firebrand revolutionary, vocal advocate of Hindu-Muslim unity, ethical dissenter, and freedom fighter, I think is important and timely. To conclude, I want to read one more sher, and with that I will end. पढ़िए इसके सिवा न कोई सबक, पढ़िए इसके सिवा न कोई सबक, खिदमते खल्को इश्क़े हज़रते हक़. Learn no lesson except this: serve all mankind and love truth. Thank you very much.
Show you a small video on Hasrat Mohani and play for you the song Chupke Chupke. Thank you.
Who coined the famous slogan Inqilab Zindabad? He was Hazrat Mohani, freedom fighter, poet, communist. He was also a firm believer in Islam and a Krishna Bhakt. The author of many Urdu poems and ghazals, Ghulam Ali and Jagjit Singh immortalized Hazrat Mohani's famous ghazal Chupke Chupke Raat Din.
Chupke Chupke Raat Din